The Man Who Filled Up at Midnight, an Eerie Encounter. Every gas station has its regulars. The morning commuters, the late-night snackers, and then those who fit nowhere. Those like the man who drove the beat-up red Ford truck. He visited Luke's Gas and Go every night promptly at midnight, but no one ever saw him during the day. Routine. He'd pull in, always parking at pump number 3. The truck's rusted door would creak open, and out would step a man, always wearing a faded jean jacket, even in the blistering summer heat. Luke noticed that, peculiarly, the man had the same amount to fill every night, exactly $10 worth of gas. One evening, driven by curiosity and a dash of boredom, Luke tried striking up a conversation. "Hey there. Noticed you come by a lot at this time. Late night commutes?" The man simply nodded, handed over a $10 bill, and went on his way. The discovery. A few weeks later, during a casual chat with a regular, Luke mentioned the mysterious man in the red Ford. The regular's face turned ashen. "You mean the one who always fills up for $10?" Luke nodded, now curious and a bit unnerved. "That's impossible," the regular whispered. "He died years ago in a crash, ran out of gas on the highway at midnight. They say he had just $10 in his pocket." The final night. The revelation left Luke unsettled, but he tried to dismiss it as a tall tale. However, that very night, as the clock neared midnight, dread gripped him. The familiar headlights of the red Ford truck pierced the darkness. Deciding to confront the situation, Luke waited by pump number 3. The door creaked open, the man stepped out, but this time he looked straight into Luke's eyes. The temperature dropped suddenly, and the station lights flickered. "Thank you for always being here," he whispered, his voice echoing in the silent night. And with that, he got into his truck and drove off, leaving behind an empty gas station bathed in an eerie glow. The red Ford truck was never seen again after that night, but Luke always kept pump number 3 open just in case. No vacancy at the Horizon stop. The Horizon Stop gas station was located on a lonesome stretch between 2 remote towns. It was not just a place to refuel cars, but also had a small motel with 5 rooms, offering weary travelers a rest stop. The traveler, late one foggy night, Mark, a businessman on his way to a conference, pulled into Horizon Stop, tired and in need of a bed. The sign outside flashed "Vacancy," a welcome sight for him. He entered the dimly lit reception to find an old TV playing a black and white film, a dusty bell, and nobody behind the counter. After ringing the bell, an elderly man named Clyde appeared, greeting him with a weary smile. Mark received the key to room 4 and made his way across the wet pavement to his room. As he settled into bed, he heard muffled conversations from room 5 next door, punctuated by laughter. He thought little of it and drifted off to sleep. Disturbances. Mark was awakened in the middle of the night by a loud argument from room 5. A man's voice shouted about betrayal, and a woman cried, pleading with him. Unsettled but too tired to act, Mark tried to ignore the sounds and returned to sleep. By dawn, the noises had ceased. Mark checked out early, mentioning the disturbance to Clyde, who looked genuinely puzzled. "Room 5. It was unoccupied last night," Clyde murmured. Mark left, attributing Clyde's response to his old age and forgetfulness. The revelation. Weeks passed, and Lydia, a freelance writer in search of offbeat stories, checked into Horizon Stop. She overheard Clyde talking to a local about the recurring noises from room 5, so she decided to dig deeper. What she unearthed was a tragic tale from the 70s. A couple checked into room 5, and amid allegations of affairs and betrayals, the husband murdered his wife and then took his own life in that very room. Lydia decided to spend a night in room 5. Armed with a recorder and a camera, she hoped to document any anomalies. As night fell, the unmistakable sounds of a couple arguing started. The voices grew louder, climaxing with a chilling scream, and then silence. Terrified, Lydia left the room but played back her recorder. Nothing. It was as if the event was trapped in a loop, replaying the tragedy but leaving no trace behind. The final night, Lydia, desperate to unravel the mystery, decided to spend one last night in room 5. This time she brought with her an old newspaper article detailing the tragic event and a photograph of the couple. As midnight approached, the arguments began anew. Instead of cowering, Lydia started talking to the entities, reading the article aloud, showing them their own photo, and urging them to move on. Hours passed, and as dawn approached, the male voice in the room began to weep, apologizing, expressing regret. Lydia felt an overwhelming sadness in the room, a palpable heaviness. Then, just as suddenly as it had begun, it stopped. An eerie calm settled over room 5. The next day, Clyde, finding Lydia's door ajar and her room empty, noticed 2 additions to the room: a faded newspaper article and an old photograph placed neatly on the bedside table. From that day on, no disturbances were ever reported from room 5. Lydia's whereabouts, however, remained a mystery. Underneath the fluorescents. Daisy had always thought that the long shifts at the gas station were rather monotonous. The seemingly never-ending hum of the fluorescent lights, the soft chime of the entrance door as customers walked in, and the gentle beep of the cash register had become her nightly symphony, a curious visitor. One cold winter's evening, a frail old woman entered. Her appearance was odd, wearing a heavy shawl, even though it was a relatively warm winter. Daisy greeted her, but the woman just shuffled past, heading straight to the restroom. This was not out of the ordinary, as many travelers often stop just to use the facilities. But an hour passed, then 2, and there was no sign of her. Worried, Daisy knocked on the restroom door. "Ma'am, is everything all right?" Silence. Concern turned to genuine fear. With a deep breath, she slowly opened the door. It was empty, impossibly empty. The photos. A week later, while cleaning, Daisy stumbled upon a pile of old photographs hidden beneath the counter. Curiously, she began to look through them. They seemed to document the gas station's history. There were pictures from its grand opening, snaps of old cars, employees, and regulars. But one photograph caught her eye. It was the same old woman, looking much younger, standing outside the gas station. The date on the back read, Winter 1952. The legend. Talking to some of the older folks in town, Daisy discovered a chilling story. In the winter of 1952, a young woman had disappeared at that very gas station. She had last been seen using the restroom. Despite a thorough search, she was never found, as if she had vanished into thin air. Daisy felt a shiver run down her spine. Every night she'd hear the soft chime of the entrance door around the same time. She no longer checked to see who it was. She knew. The Whistler. Working the night shift at a remote gas station can be unsettling, but for Mike, the vast starry nights and the tranquility it brought were reasons enough to love his job. That was until the whistling began. The first encounter. It started subtly. Around 2 a.m., when the world was at its quietest, Mike began to hear a soft, melodic whistle, always the same tune. It seemed to come from the edge of the woods, just beyond the reach of the gas station lights. It was eerie, but also oddly entrancing. One night, mustering some courage, Mike decided to call out, "Who's there?" The whistling stopped abruptly, only to resume a few moments later, but this time louder and closer. The sight. Weeks went by, and the whistling became more frequent. Mike tried to ignore it, often drowning it out with loud music. But one night, as he glanced at the CCTV footage, he saw a shadowy figure standing at the edge of the woods, whistling that haunting tune. Frightened, Mike decided to confront this entity. He stepped outside, the cold air hitting his face. The whistling grew louder, echoing all around. Following the sound, he reached the wood's edge. There, he found a small, tarnished whistle lying on the ground. The history. Curious and shaken, Mike shared his experiences with a local. He learned of a legend about a gas station attendant from decades ago who would whistle while working his night shifts. One fateful night, he had ventured into the woods after hearing a mysterious sound and was never seen again. All that was found was his whistle. Mike quit his job soon after, but it's said that on quiet nights, if you stand near the woods by the gas station, you can still hear the haunting melody of the missing attendant.